Thank you so much, Mayor Levine-Cava, for welcoming us today and kicking off CoMotion Miami. And now, I think it's time really to deep dive in this new transportation paradigm that there is in Miami. And none better to moderate this panel as a good friend of CoMotion, Mitch Bierman, a partner at Weiss Serota Helfman Cole. Mitch, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome. It's actually Weiss, Serota, Helfman, Cole, and Bierman. Anyway, we've got a great opening panel, and it was really interesting. I was just back in the green room with the panelists, and three of them said, this is a different world for me. This is not my regular place where I'm, my regular venue, because they're coming from different industries. And I said, well, that's by design. You're here because of that. You're not a transportation industry insider. You're doing something that's relevant to the whole much larger conversation about mobility, which is mobility and its relationship to our quality of life, to the built environment, to the aesthetic environment, to nature, to equity, social equity, and to the economy, and how all of those things converge to help us establish what we call our community. And so I'm really very proud to have our panelists, and they're going to come in and introduce themselves. We've got Leanne Buchanan, we've got Jessica Goldman Srebnick, we've got Bernard Ziskovich, and of course, our very own Eulois Cleckley. And if you live in Miami, you know these names already because these are the most important leaders in various industries in our community. But they're going to introduce themselves to you. We still need Eulois. And, well, he's probably taking a call from the secretary. Anyway, he'll be in a minute, and he's going to introduce himself last because you already know him. But I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves, what they do, what they've been working on recently, and how that relates to those topics that I just talked about. And then we're going to bring it all back together and bring that link to mobility and how mobility affects all of those things. So let me ask Leanne. I'm going to sit down too. I'm not going to stay at this podium. And then we're going to have a conversation, and they're going to introduce themselves. I'm going to ask them a couple of questions to get them to focus on some things that I've been curious about. And then we're going to ask you if you have questions for any of the panelists. And we've got a tight schedule, but we're going to get a lot done within the next 50 minutes. So thank you all for joining us. I'm going to ask Leanne to kick it off.
Thank you so much, Mitch. How's everybody doing today? We can do better than that. Let's give a round of applause. This is going to be a great conversation. So my name is Leanne Buchanan, and I'm proud to serve as the president of the Miami-Dade Innovation Authority. It is a public-private partnership that is focused on investing in technology and solutions that really improve the quality of life for Miamians across many verticals, thinking about climate innovation, housing opportunities, healthcare, and, of course, mobility and transportation. My background is I'm a recovering attorney, and we were talking about that backstage. But I do think that time as a commercial litigator gave me a really unique insight onto how we can think about systems and models and frameworks to reimagine our community. I found my way into the tech and innovation space about just almost a decade ago, leading projects that are really designed to make technology innovation more accessible for people and to think about the role that innovation can play in transforming community, leading the Venture Cafe first, Air Ventures, as well as now the Innovation Authority. Welcome. And to think about the question, what is this new transportation paradigm? What comes to mind for me is really, what is the opportunity here in our community as it relates to transportation, but also the infrastructure that supports transportation? If we were to zoom out 20 years from now, What is the Miami we want to see? And what are the strategic investments that we must make in our infrastructure, in our built environment, and also in the culture of how we approach mobility? That's one of the themes that came to mind actually as I was driving here is I'm from Vancouver, Canada. And for those of you that are not from Miami, if you're familiar, Canada in general really has a different approach to the culture of transportation. And Vancouver in particular always had this motto, you can get anywhere in the Lower Mainland in 90 minutes or less. And the way that I grew up, doesn't matter what age you are, you could get on a bus, you could get on a train, you can get on a sea bus, and really navigate your way across a very expansive geographic scope. Miami-Dade County is a community that has low density when we think about our geographic landscape. And so we have a real opportunity to think about what are the multimodal and efficient ways to help everybody navigate. We're very reliant on cars. I think over 55% of the CO2 emissions here are because of cars. And it took me 30 minutes to get here, which probably should have been a 5-minute drive, but there's a lot of congestion. And so what are the ways that we can think about multimodal transportation, integration, and efficiency for people? How can we think about being more strategic about getting people across a very wide geographic landscape, not just in our county, but also across the Tri-County area? And the two other things that come to mind for me is this issue around net zero. How can we ensure that transportation is a driver of a carbon neutral way of getting people from point A to point B? And how do we make sure that it is equitable to include the people that are not in this room? So those are the things at the top of my head. A little bit more about me, and I guess I'll turn it over to Jessica. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jessica Goldman Srebnick, and I do feel like a little bit of a fish out of water here, no pun intended, but really, really happy to be here. I am a self-proclaimed ambassador to the city of Miami. I am passionate about all things Miami. My titles include I'm the co-chair of a company called Goldman Properties. My dad founded our company in 1968. And we revitalize neighborhoods. So think of neighborhoods like Soho and South Beach and Center City, Philadelphia and Wall Street. And this wonderful neighborhood, if you've never been, called Wynwood, probably one of the most dynamic, artistic, creative neighborhoods in the world. And so we go into these neighborhoods very early on and we find ways to elevate them, and we find creative ways to elevate them and bring industry and bring creativity and push things forward, whether it's architecture or art, not just for that neighborhood, but globally. And so that's one of my roles. I'm also the CEO of a company called Goldman Global Arts, which I founded a number of years ago to use the artistic elements that I'm so passionate about and marry them to amazing projects. So the NFL is one of my clients, Citibank's one of my clients, putting art into the world, pushing art forward, creating environments, creating a sense of place is incredibly, incredibly important. Miami is, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, but Miami is an extraordinary city and is on a wild trajectory of growth. And with that growth comes incredible challenges, transportation being one of them. And so we came to Miami in 1986. And so I've seen an immense amount of change in our city. And I've seen an immense amount of change just in the last 3 years. But I am, I'm really happy to be here. I'm happy that you're all here. I'm happy to know that you're all focused on what can we do to make things better and make the quality of life for the people that live here or whatever city that you are a part of, make that quality of life that much better.
Thank you. That was great. And Bernard, will you please tell us what's going on with you?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Bernard Ziskovich. I'm the head of my firm that does architecture, urban design, planning, interiors, etc. but I'm here to share with you a couple of thoughts that might be apropos. One is for years, because I've been in this community working for decades now, I always told people, you know, the thing about Miami is, if you think anthropomorphically, Miami is still in diapers. It's a city that hasn't grown up, that doesn't really know who it is. And I'm here to announce today that I think we have entered early childhood. And because of that, I think we need good education, we need bold vision, we need to have high aspirations, because we are truly, notwithstanding all the buildings that we see, we are still not yet a mature city. And I think that the things that I've tried to do in my career, because I need to introduce myself, are really tied to a lot of the things that Leanne, Jessica, Eulois, and so many others are involved in. We're really believers in creating neighborhoods that add quality to life. I'm very proud to say that we created Midtown Miami. I love seeing it grow over the past 20 years, and it's really realizing, I think, its maturity. We're very proud to be the firm that did the Brightline stations, and as I travel, I'm just thrilled to see so many people coming up and down the escalator. We're working on the project, and I'm wondering, I don't know, is this really going to work? And it really identifies, I think, some of the problems we're going to talk about here today, which is connectivity and how do we make linkages. Because we have some basic infrastructure, but we don't really have a system that I can say is a system that serves the whole community yet. So I'm looking forward to our conversation, and I'm going to keep pressing the idea that we should be visionary and bold, because we're not cooked, we're just starting, and we should really lay it out in the best possible way.
Thank you, Bernard. You've already met Eulois, but I would like Eulois just to elaborate a little bit more on his self-introduction from earlier.
Sure, good morning, and by way of introduction again, I'm the Director and CEO of the Department of Transportation and Public Works from Miami-Dade County. I'm Eulois Cleckley, and it's great to see everybody here today. I've been in this position, I guess, over 18 months, going on 2 years now. Feels like 20, but that's because we have a lot of stuff going on, and we have great partners throughout the county that really make this engine run. Those of you who are not familiar with this structure here in the county, the mayor mentioned earlier, we're close to 3 million people, but we also have 34 municipalities within the county. The city of Miami is just one municipality. So from a transportation perspective, we cover all of the 34 municipalities in terms of providing transit, but each individual jurisdiction has one transit funding through the CITT, as well, which is a program and a surtax that gets collected from the half penny that was mentioned before, which 23% of what gets raised actually goes to municipalities. The balance of that, so that 77%, is coming to the county, and for the purposes of figuring out ways to expand our mass transit system and do other types of infrastructure projects that the voters passed back in 2002. So our department, just for context's sake, we do have our Metro Rail system is a 25-mile, 24-station system. Our Metro Mover system is a 4.4-mile automated people mover system downtown. And we have our Metro Bus system, which is about 100 routes that we serve throughout the county. By breakdown ridership, our bus system covers 70% of the ridership as compared to the other two modes. The last mode I'll mention is that we have paratransit as well, which is about 4,700 trips a day and one of the largest paratransit systems in the country. 9,000 miles of roadways, 200 bridges, and 190 miles of canals, and then a bunch of sidewalks and 3,000 traffic signals and all that good stuff. So what we're really trying to do is really meet, I think what everybody's talking about here today is figuring out how to advance not only our capital program, but just change the way that we're thinking about transportation. And I know we'll get into that discussion further.
Great. So now we're going to go into some questions, and the first question actually is for Eulois. Eulois, the title of this whole conference and our opening panel is the new transportation paradigm. So what does that mean to you? What is new about our transportation paradigm? How will it change our lives? And what specifically are the steps to accomplishing that?
Appreciate the question. The way that our department is looking at transportation is to shift the way we think about what our infrastructure is to be designed and operated for. And I think all of us are probably very familiar with the fact that we need to be focused on moving people as well as goods in a more efficient manner, and just not focus on the vehicle and the car, as Mayor Cava mentioned. So in order to do that, you have to re-envision how you design roadways, make sure you're prioritizing the most vulnerable user, and then making sure that you're providing services like we have in our transit system to the people that not only are dependent on transit, but make transit something that's competitive for those people that are driving by themselves in a vehicle. So, this new paradigm shift, I think, is an industry-wide paradigm shift, and it takes a while for that to take place. But I think we are in a position where, through the leadership of what we have in the county, available funding sources and the like, we're serving as a catalyst to make sure that we transition and make that change. And for our department, one aspect of what we're focused on is what we call Shift 305, which is a set of projects, programs, and priorities that we'll be focused on over the next 2 to 3 years that will make our transportation system safer, clean, efficient, and more connected. And so when we say safe, making sure that we're designing our roadways in a safe manner, we have over 370 people dying on the roadways every single year. So we need to figure out a way from a design perspective to make our roadways safer. Clean is about being environmentally friendly, more sustainable, and making sure that we're approaching this from a resiliency standpoint, whether it be elevating roadways or having a more cleaner fleet for our transit services. Efficient is making sure that we move people and goods efficiently, and we have one of the largest ATMS or advanced transportation management system in the country. We're upgrading all 3,000 of our signals, and then for connected, it's really about transit and making sure our capital projects are making those greater connections. So that's our platform that we've just developed. It's across multiple departments, and we're focused on delivering on these expectations in the next 2 years, and that's how you start to really implement things and not just talk about it.
So, quick follow-up. I think, just judging from the mayor's comments I hear from county commissioners who share the decision-making authority with the mayor, the political will is there to accomplish this. Is the popular will there, and does anything need to be done to generate greater popular will so that the allocation of resources to this is something that is a no-brainer for people?
And I do believe that it has to start with an alignment with the executive side of government with the legislative side. Because at the end of the day, change is difficult. And for a lot of individuals, they may not be accustomed to change. They're going to resist it initially. So actually having the political will and fortitude to deal with people that might complain a little bit, to make sure that you're moving forward with the change that will create this environment to be future ready. And at the end of the day, people will ultimately receive the benefit of that change. They may not realize it today, but you have to stick with it. And so I think that's the first thing. The second piece would be figuring out ways that we can communicate better and engage with our communities to know the benefit of the change and to say that it's not that bad. We deal with it a lot if we're trying to repurpose travel lanes and the like for adding in a dedicated bike lane. People will be upset, but after a period of time, they'll be okay because they'll figure out it's not that bad, not that significant an impact, and it's just a way that people will be more accustomed. So I would say that we have to just stick to it, and then at the end of the day, people will reap the benefits.
Second question is to Jessica. Jessica, Goldman Companies has been a driving force in transforming the neighborhoods of Miami into, a whole lifestyle change from when I was growing up into a walkable urban environment and a beautiful urban environment. So how do you see, as you're going about thinking through a project, the relationship with the mobility side of things?
So when we go into neighborhoods, there are a number of things that we look for, and location, obviously. How, what is it a walkable neighborhood? So when we first came to South Florida is a very vehicular city, and I think it's something like 90% of people use private cars to get to where they need to go. And so how do you create walkable neighborhoods? And so South Beach became our first, Wynwood became our next, and parking is incredibly important. You think about pain points. Why do people go to different places for what reasons? And so if you want to go to a restaurant on Brickell, well, you know what, there's so much traffic, I don't want to go. Where will I park? How much is it going to cost to park? Can you meander around the neighborhood, or is it just a kind of a one and done? Curating is something that we think a lot about. And so when we curate neighborhoods, it's not just curating. When you think of the word curating, you think of art. We think of the word curating for neighborhoods. We think of how will we tenant the environment? Will we have things that you can go to in the morning, in the afternoons, in the evenings, making it enticing for all kinds of people, which means all kinds of products at all kinds of price points. Architecture is super critical. How does it scale to the pedestrian? And so those are things we think about a lot. Food and beverage is a very important component to great neighborhoods. Affordability is an important component. We have some problems in this city. It's an extraordinary city for so many reasons, but we have an influx of people that have come post-COVID because they recognize the quality of life here, and the quality of life is pretty outstanding. But the challenges that come with that are more congestion. We can't build fast enough. We literally cannot build fast enough for the amounts of retail tenants and commercial tenants and office tenants. And so, when we looked in neighborhoods, it is, Wynwood, you couldn't get to Wynwood by public transportation. And really great cities require outstanding transportation options. And so I think, and being on this panel with you, sir, is a great privilege because, I like to think always about pain points. How do we solve for pain points? What is preventing people from getting on the public transportation that we do have? And so, and that requires sometimes crazy thinking. Does that mean like for a month it's free? Get back on there, see what it's like. Maybe you haven't been on public transportation in years, but maybe that will be a way to kind of start to soften the congestion issues. Because if you've been living here for any stretch of time, you know that you have to add another 30 minutes onto your travel time. Well, 30 minutes equates to productivity time. And so I think, those are a lot of the things that we think about, but always creating a place that has a sense of place that is unique, that is one of a kind, so that when you're standing on Ocean Drive, you know exactly where in the world you are. When you're standing in Wynwood, you know exactly where in the world you are. And that's the kind of thinking that is required when creating any kind of, an important project. And at some point, I'd love to talk. I'm also the chair of the Town Square Neighborhood Development Corporation, which is very heavily involved in the underdeck as a project, and something that If you don't know about that project, something that everybody should.
And I want to come back to that because I think it's an important thing. But quick follow-up, most pressing need for us to be able to continue, for you, for Goldman, to be able to continue to bring us, beautiful, walkable, accessible, and socially equitable neighborhoods. What's the most pressing need from a mobility standpoint?
Great question. I would say innovation in our planning department so that we can build faster and better. Affordable housing is critical to our city and the future of our city. And innovative ways, whether it is safe biking, whether it is, the Bright Line is a game changer for our community. Buses that are that people want to take, that there is a reason to get on public transportation and a reason not to get into your car.
Okay, wonderful. So I think that leads great to the question that I have for Leanne. Leanne, you've worked, I think, to ensure that the Miami momentum that we seem to be enjoying now is inclusive, and I know that you've championed consideration of social equity in our community decision making. So do you have an opinion on steps we should be taking to ensure that Miami remains affordable to the people who are necessary to continue this economic engine, all of the people who are working to support this?
Mitch, I think that's probably $1 billion+ question. So I wouldn't say that I have the exact answer, but I'm happy to share a couple thoughts on how we might get there. I recently read something that said Miami is at least in the top 3 most unaffordable cities in the United States. And when I moved here 16 years ago, that was not the case. And we've seen just astronomical increases in the cost of housing, the cost of, and wages are not rising to meet the cost of inflation. And so I think the question, particularly as it relates to mobility and transportation, is what are the factors that incentivize government to act differently in how it's creating a more equitable opportunity for people to navigate our community? And also as we think about newcomers, what is the culture of transportation that they have in terms of the expectations in coming to Miami? I often think the people that are not in the room are the people that are working in service jobs that maybe don't have a car and have to travel to and fro on the bus. I can tell you during a public transit day, I took the bus I think the last time I took a bus was about 7 years ago, and it was not a pleasant experience. And so how we think about affordability cannot just be a factor of how expensive it is to take public transportation. I think that Miami-Dade County and the leadership has done a really great job to incorporate new technologies to make it much easier and to have a much better experience in riding the Metro Rail and taking buses. But I think that there's a broader question, which is if you can no longer live in the urban core where you have much more density and affordability considerations push communities, particularly those in the service sector, further out west. And then we still struggle with more efficient last mile transportation options, then where does that leave people? We actually saw a 1% net decrease in population if you looked at the recent numbers. And we know at one point 900 people a day were moving to Miami. So what is really going on? I think we're missing data. I think we're missing data on who is leaving and why. At least in response to the mayor's effort through Thrive 305, we saw that 41% of respondents said they would use public transportation if it got them where they needed when they needed it. And when it comes to affordability, I think the further you move out west or the further you move north, or if you have to leave the urban core, then it becomes less affordable. So what are some of the solutions that we can explore? Are there ways that we might subsidize the cost of transportation? I love that 1 month of free transportation option that you talked about. But what are ways that we can subsidize the cost of transportation? How might we incentivize more clean alternative modes of transportation? And then how can we help people adopt public transportation as their primary mode of getting around our community? And I think that speaks to the psychology behind how people think about public transportation and less to the actual dollar amounts. I think that's a broader question that we haven't really dug into, and I'm sure, Bernard, you might have some thoughts on that with your experience. But I think I actually don't have solutions. I just have a lot more questions. Who are we serving? How are they being served? How much does it cost them? And what is the opportunity cost in the decision-making around taking public transportations are the questions I think we actually need to answer. And I think the last point that I'll say is I think that's an open opportunity for innovation. The Miami-Dade Innovation Authority, we're looking at how we can partner with the private sector that often has agile solutions that are very effective and collaborate very closely with government to pilot these solutions to see how we can improve the quality of life for Miamians. And so I think there's a clear intersection point here where there is a business opportunity and a public good where we can really invest in innovation.
Well, one of the people who influenced my thinking on this was Bob Marley, and he talked about mindful transportation, and he said, car is the worst, motorcycle is the next best, bus is the next best, bicycle after that, donkey, and then pure foot. My feet is my only carriage, he said. So as we're thinking about transportation, I want to ask Bernard, who has been a great advocate of bicycle transportation and has designed some very elaborate plans, to talk about how we better accommodate the need for the more basic forms of transportation, people getting around on their own, individually, on foot, on bike, on scooter, skateboard, donkey, not donkey, but how we do that in a way that's better than we're doing now. How do you tell Eulois how it should be done?
Well, I have the worst job ever, she says, right? I'm supposed to critique Eulois. Okay, that's great. Well, one comment is donkeys are not the best because of the methane problem. So we should probably avoid that. But in all seriousness, I think that what we have is we have a convergence of crises in a way. I think transportation is very connected to climate. And I think that climate is of course, of existential importance to us in this location. And the points that Jessica raised as being interested in pain points and what Leanne has been raising in terms of innovation and equity, I think it all kind of comes together into this conversation because transportation, when you think about it, affects all of us every single day. So my take on it is we should do the easiest things we can possibly do first, and the easiest things that might also coincide with the best climate responses. So, as was already mentioned, the least energy consumptive is walking and then biking and et cetera, as we go from low tech to high tech. And that brings into issue, in my own experience and in my nonprofit efforts for my Plan Z project, a realization that not everyone who has high goals shares them, because when you get to the point of touching people's daily life, it depends on whose life you're touching. So, in order for us to make more space, we could accommodate biking, and the biking, in my mind, is unfortunately considered in our community based on the great plans that have been done, but they're not commuter plans. They're basically bike trail plans. So if you want to go a mile, which would be so easy on a bike, you feel like you take your life in your hands. If you want to go on a trail, you're not confronting cars. Of course, you're going to go on a trail. So the biking community has really evolved into a recreational biking community because I don't think we have a commuter biking community. So how would you create a commuter biking community? You have to take space in the street. You have to make sidewalks more pedestrian friendly. I mean, anyone that's walked downtown or Brickell, it's really hard not to bump into light poles, signage, all kinds of junk in the street. It's very hard to walk next to a friend. When you're on a bicycle, if you're in a 4-foot lane with two lanes of traffic, you're not going to do that. So we have to decide where the pain is going to be. And in my mind, transportation is the vehicle, no pun intended, for getting people out of the car and into more climate-friendly micro-mobility options like biking and scooters and things like that. Because I believe, based on my own experience traveling, you look at Amsterdam, you look at Copenhagen, you look all over Europe, who wouldn't do that? So the issue is transportation also needs to be considered in terms of density, because we're about to hopefully really ramp up the smart plans. The smart plans are the perfect location for increased density, increased housing, affordable housing, social issues that need to be met. So the corridor of transit in every city in the world is always the most valuable and always the most dense. And I think that we need to not just look at transportation, we need to mix in a very bold way transportation, housing, social equity, and climate to begin to have something that we can promote. Now, my last comment is it's going to really piss people off because when you begin to do that, you're going to find all kinds of people coming out of the woodwork that say, wait a minute, I don't want to be out of my car. I want to have more parking garages. I mean, we do this every day of our lives. We can do all the social benefit issues we want to raise up, but when it comes time to implementation, it becomes very hard. So my last comment is we need to be bold by saying the one thing we should know about the growth of Miami is transportation should not be held hostage to individual interests, because transportation can't work that way. Transportation is the one thing that we all use, that we all need to conceive of with really strong elected official support so that we can overcome all the little, how many municipalities? 34 municipalities, divide that into neighborhoods. You've got hundreds of constituent groups that are not going to want the transportation coming through their neighborhood. And I think, to me, that's one of the biggest issues we have to overcome.
I'm glad that you brought that up. We're at less than 15 minutes. I do want to leave 10 minutes in case people in this audience have questions. So I want to go very quickly. One, on this panel, raise your hand if you are prepared to inflict pain on the single-car driver in order to prioritize the other less consumptive forms of transportation. All right. Eulois? All right.
So that's a trick question.
All right. Before you answer, audience, raise your hand if you're ready to prioritize other less consumptive forms of transportation over the single-use car. All right. So many of these people don't live in Miami, but the popular will seems to be there among the community of people who are thinking about this. Eulois, what's your thinking?
Yeah. So one. It's interesting. Every time I sit on these types of panels, I always walk away with homework. So I appreciate you guys doing that. But just if I can, I'll take a couple minutes about kind of what we're doing, because I think the commentary here is important, and I think that the county is advancing a lot of different types of projects. I'll just run through a couple of things. One, with respect to the SMART plan, which we've worked with the TPO, and Eileen Blueclay is there, to transition to the SMART program, where we are very much focused at this point in time to actually implement. And so we have, as the mayor mentioned earlier, we have an active project now that will be finished by the end of 2024, which is the county's first ever bus rapid transit corridors, 20 miles with a BRT service with 14 iconic rail-like stations that will be serviced by a all-electric battery-operated bus fleet. And it will be something that will be transformational for folks living down south, people that live in Florida City and Homestead, which are some of our poorest residents, which right now for them to get downtown, it takes about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes. When we initiate revenue service in 2025, it'll take approximately 30 to 35 minutes to get those folks to downtown. That's transformational. The second project, which we right now got a funding commitment from Florida Department of Transportation of $103 million. That is the Northeast Corridor, which is an actual commuter rail service that we will be utilizing the unused capacity on the Bright Line intercity rail service at this point in time that will connect downtown to Aventura with 5 stations in between, with 2 trains every 30 minutes to provide that service. We're advancing, or we're looking to expand our existing people mover system to connect to the 2 stations on the city of Miami Beach to Herod Plaza at the city of Miami Beach, city of Miami side, which will again provide direct connection for those people going to the beach. And then we're also working on a long-standing commitment to actually expand Metro Rail up Northwest 27th Avenue that will connect the Metro Rail Martin Luther King Station to the actual stadium and the Broward County line. And then we're looking at doing some additional mass transit options and expansions on along the east-west corridor to connect from the Tamiami Park and Ride, the Dolphin Mall Park and Ride to downtown. All these things are happening right now, and literally, if we stay focused and push this through, we will have an expanded transit system by 2030/2031 with all of those projects done. So that is transformational. On the bus side, starting in July, we're actually beginning to implement our Budded Bus Network, which is a complete and total redesign of our bus system that has never happened since we've had Metro Bus service, not to this extent. And so we're going to start in July. We're actually going to complete that implementation of the Better Bus Network by November. And what will end up happening is, one, more frequency. We'll have more essential routes that will have 15-minute frequency, so more buses that will come more often. And we're going to be increasing and doubling the amount of people in poverty to high-frequency bus routes to get them to where they need to go. And just create and optimize our system in a more efficient manner. So these are things that we're doing to try to catch up to get the county in a position to really satisfy what I think the mobility needs are and what the community has been asking for. So that's just a couple of things. And I know you wanted to get to some of the questions, but I just don't want people to leave and feel that we're not addressing some of the issues that are brought up today. The last thing I'll mention is that we are working with the development community along these smart program corridors to make sure that we're building more mixed-use development with high affordable and workforce standards as a part of what is being built. And so, we at a baseline have 12.5% requirement for all new development that is transit-oriented development on county-owned property. And we've been partnering and working very well with the many of the developers to make sure that they're meeting that commitment. And we have 6,000 affordable housing units that are being built along these corridors. And so, it's an exciting time, and it's an opportunity, I think, over the next decade or so, you'll see a complete transformation.
Thank you, Eulois. Now we have time for questions from the audience. If nobody wants to ask a question, I have plenty more. But if you do want to ask a question, please go to one of the 2 microphones that is in either aisle and state your question, please in the form of a question, and we'll try to answer it.
Don't be shy.
All right, then. I'm going to ask more questions. To Leanne, we've got a lot of people coming in to Miami to do really interesting things. Great talent from around the world, from around the United States. How do we ensure that homegrown talent rises with this huge tide that we're enjoying, and is there a mobility element to that?
It's a great question. And then I also want to go back to something that Bernard said. I read a stat that said for every $1 billion we invest in public transportation, that creates 50,000 jobs. And as we think about the modernization of our public transportation infrastructure, that's an opportunity. We're seeing double and triple digit increases in the rate of students enrolling in computer science programs at our local institutions, Miami-Dade College, Florida Memorial, FIU. And as we look at the role that AI, machine learning, sensors, and all of these horizon technologies play in the modernization of our infrastructure, we have to make sure that we have the talent to be able to service this new form of mobility. And so what I'll say, that's an opportunity. I know the mayor's vision is around future ready, and we've heard President Pumariega say that they need future-proof skills. And so I think locally there's an opportunity to remove the financial and social barriers to create career pathways into technology and innovation, and even some of the new skill sets that are going to be required to maintain a more sustainable and clean fleet of buses and other modes of transportation. The other thing that I want to mention, and Bernard, you kind of brought this to the conversation, is what are the right behavioral interventions that we need to think about to just shift the vision of transportation in Miami? And I think that's an esoteric and broader philosophical question, but I don't think we should shy away from these philosophical inquiries. I'm wearing a dress from Ghana, and we were talking backstage. I spent a lot of time on the African continent, taking Miami-Dade high school students over there for leadership development. And in a lot of nations, Rwanda, the Gambia, which is a very small nation near Senegal, they often have these no movement days where unless you have a special pass, you are not allowed to drive. You're not supposed to take public transport, or you're not supposed to take your private vehicle. And I'm not proposing we go to that extreme, but I'm using it as an example to say, where are we looking for inspiration for us to rethink how we center collective transportation? Often we think about transportation, it's such an individualistic endeavor. What if we had a community where the way that we thought about getting from place to place was not just on the individual level, but collectively? I think that the building code would look different. Our planning department would look different. We would have a community where I wouldn't have to drive. I hate driving. I don't want to drive. I bet you don't want to drive. But we don't have the right incentives in place to make public transportation or collective transportation our first modality. In other cities across the world where I'm from, you don't need to drive, but the incentives are there, and I think there's an opportunity for us to have that conversation.
Can I just challenge that just for a second?
I love it.
So COVID kind of created an entire remote work kind of culture. As a business owner, I don't love remote work. I don't. It's a very nice way to say it. Because it challenges culture and it challenges kind of big thinking and ideas. Like there's nothing better than being on a stage together, in a room together. It's very different than having a screen in front of you. And so I always want to promote the fact, I want you to come to the office. I want you to walk our neighborhoods. I want you to shop in the stores and eat in the restaurants and not just be at home. Being at home is wonderful. I love being at home. I love, all the things associated with that. And I totally see your point, but I also think it's really important, like from a mental perspective, from a societal perspective, for us to be together and to figure out ways to be together. And what are safe ways, what are clean ways, what are responsible ways, all of those things. So, yes.
Excellent. Quick question from this side.
Hi there, my name is Riley Kempman. I'm a journalist from Refresh Miami. My question is about startups and what role can startups, and particularly Miami startups, play in building this new transportation paradigm that you've been talking about?
I think, Leanne, you're
Riley, that's a great question. Great to see you. I think a couple of things that we're thinking about at the Innovation Authority is how can we help facilitate a pathway to revenue for those mobility and transportation startups. Right now, if you are to pilot with government, you often do so at your own expense. But early stage companies, sometimes with really great solutions, may not have the ability to navigate a government pilot opportunity, and they may not have the dollars to do so. And so with the support of the Board of County Commissioners under the brilliant thinking of Mayor Daniela Levine Cava, the Miami-Dade Innovation Authority was granted $3 million to be able to invest at least $1 million a year into startups that have technology and innovative solutions to improve things like mobility and transportation. I think the second thing that I'll say is beyond the pilot, what is the opportunity to create procurement and commercial viability for those startups once they're able to prove out the viability of their solution in this market. Those are the things that we're thinking about, is how can we create a more friendly environment for startups both locally and globally to build here, to test here, and to deploy their solutions that really make things better for Miamians. I hope that answers your question.
That's great. I think we're out of time. Real quick.
Mine's a quick question. My name's Scott Canning. I work for Aqua Superpower, and our company specializes in rolling out charging infrastructure for the marine sector. I noticed that Eulois mentioned that obviously you think Miami, you think the water, you think the beautiful blue water and the canals you mentioned. What, if any, plans are there on the sort of water taxi, water bus side in Miami?
All right. This is something that we've begun to analyze. I think there is an opportunity to figure out how we can utilize that as a commuter option. And we've actually begun to engage in some initial conversations with Broward County to try to figure out if there's a regional commuter water taxi service that could be initiated. And so it's definitely there. And it's one additional layer that we're going to continue to look for moving forward to add into our mobility mix.